Hey Rayclast, what's up? It's Zambash here. Thought I would do just a quick video. This is a guide, but it's going to be a kind of quick informal one here for the build I've been playing. Since the Soul Run of the Spiral character never got its single target fixed, I still really believe that that skill is intended to be able to hit multiple times per cast, based on the design of the skill, but never happened. So I switched this character you see here in the background, tried another new skill, the Earthshatter of Prominence, I think it's called. I think the skill's really good and has a ton of potential because it has like more damage per use than Earthquake, but doesn't have any delay that you have to wait for, so you can like spam them out really fast, assuming you have a good way to break these spires. But the way I did it didn't turn out super amazing. I went Juggernaut General's Cry and used Forbidden Jewels to get the Berserker Warcry thing. But overall the damage is just really kind of rubbish, and the clear speed is horribly clunky and slow, so you'll see I just skip a ton of monsters when I'm clearing. Basically I've just been doing like semi-boss rushing. I pretty much just clear out strong boxes and rituals and then kill the bosses. And I've just been doing rounds of Maven invitations, you know, Twisted Formed, Elder Slayers, etc. to farm a bit. But I have an idea for another build I want to try now. I've also got down to about Delve 350 on this build, but the lack of damage is pretty painful. As it turns out, trying to get much damage out of a non-crit attack build just feels really hard in PoE these days. Crit is kind of king. So I will let this Minotaur map run out here, and then I'll see you guys in the hideout, and I will quickly talk through what I'm using and what I did on the build. Alright, so here we are in the hideout. I've just taken my Warcry off of my left click so it's not constantly going off while I'm just moving around the hideout here. We'll go through passes first here. As I mentioned, I went with a Juggernaut because basically I wanted a really tanky character, and it's definitely accomplished that. But the damage didn't really pan out. So we went Juggernaut, we got Unstoppable, Unbreakable, Untiring, and then grabbed Unflinching for endurance charges. Since we're General's Cry and we don't really have any accuracy, we went Resolute Technique, we wouldn't really get anything from Undeniable, so it didn't go that way. We are using some kind of interesting new ascendancy stuff here. I went with the Magi, Forest Ascendancy, I went with the Tincture and the Nature's Concoction. Since we have the Tincture stuck in between this Basalt Flask and the Lion's Roar, that means we pretty much have those up all the time when we're fighting a single target as long as we keep hitting, and they have extra effect. So like if I go to my, I won't have it because I haven't hit an enemy recently. I've got 95k, I've got like 110k armor if I've actually hit something recently to proc that 30% extra effect from the Tincture. So we are always at like 110k armor, and we've got some decent max res, and those things together in combination with the Juggernaut node that makes it so some of your armor applies to elemental damage, makes it so we are pretty tanky overall. Go ahead and close the ascendancies. Just grabbing life and two-handed stuff basically, and we gotta grab a couple of Warcry wheels for cooldown. As I mentioned, we're using the Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame to get Warbringer from the Berserker. That's the one that makes it so you generate rage by Warcrying per power, and then it also sacrifices some to give you 50% more damage on your exerted attacks, and all General's Cry attacks are considered to be exerted, which is why generally the vast majority of General's Cry's builds are going to be Berserker. But I wanted the tankiness, So as I said, we get some extra max res, armor mastery for even more life. We go down for the instant war cry, so we can just constantly use General's Cry while we are cycloning around and using Cast One Channeling to generate corpses with Desecrate. Using a cluster jewel down here, went with aggressive defense to help us keep fortify up better, went with weight advantage for double damage, and martial prowess for some damage and attack speed. You do actually need to get a fairly decent amount of attack speed for this build to function decently at all. Since we are using a Marui Urki, our clones from General's Cry take a really long time to get the Earthshatter of Prominence off unless you get a decent amount of attack speed. And if you don't have enough, you'll actually end up war crying and desummoning them before they finish the attacking animation, so you won't get your attacks off. So you definitely need attack speed where you can get it. So all of my jewels have at least one attack speed roll. And you'll see on a couple of jewels, I've also gone with some of this chance to shock. And then on the helmet here, I also did an Eldritch Implicit with chance to shock. And that is because we always have this Fulgurite tincture going, which makes it so all damage can shock. And I went with Consecrated Ground on hitting a unique enemy and some item rarity there. The explicits on the tinctures are kind of weak for the most part, but the implicits, like all damage can shock, are pretty good. So I got a little bit of shock chance so that we can get some decent shocks off. For these cluster jewels, I went with double Rattling Bellow for more chance to deal double damage. I think in total with those and the node there, and this for double damage, plus my Lethal Pride, I think I'm at 35% chance to deal double damage. We got Impale here, and then we're using the Impale Gem, that gets us to 90%, and we've got an extra 10% on the gloves. We grab the mace stuff in addition to shocking. We also grab this mastery for all damage with maces and scepters can chill, so enemies are generally pretty slow around us. Over here into the duelist area, grab a couple of Warcry nodes for cooldown. This Measured Fury doesn't actually do anything for us. Well, it gives one fortification because of Lethal Pride, but the main reason I did it was just so I could grab a second Warcry Mastery for this remove all damaging ailments to deal with poisons and ignites and stuff. And then, yeah, as mentioned, we're using a Lethal Pride here, which has double damage, life, and another physical damage. So, decent Lethal Pride, whatever. You could fill this out and get some more life on Savagery if you wanted to, but I found that even with Mob Mentality, we don't really sustain Frenzy charges very well. That's pretty much how I built out the tree on the character. For gear, as I mentioned, Marui, and then typical Juggernaut stuff. We're using the Brass Dome, try to get good res roll there. Using a Rizlatha's Coil, that works out to be 18% more average damage for us. It was one-off perfect rolls on both ends to save a lot of money, and then just attack catalysts to power it up. You'll notice my gloves and boots are both empty, and I'm using a couple of unset rings to actually be able to fit everything in. That's because I went with this Oath of the Magi thing over here. By leaving the gloves and boots open, we get 25% life and an extra 30% move speed. So, when I pop the Quicksilver, we run around pretty darn quick. And we also get a decent life pool because 25% life from the gloves is pretty big. Then boots. Everything's basically the same deal, just, life resists and as much armor as you can possibly get, kind of standard Juggernaut sort of stuff. Amulet here, I've allocated Static Blows, which is way up here on the north of the passive tree. That just makes it so we can get a little bit better shocks off, but they're still not really great regardless. I think we're only still getting to 20% shocks on biggish bosses, so there might even just be a better anoint there, or better thing to do with this tincture. I don't know. As I said, the whole damage on this build, trying to get damage out of non-crit attacks just doesn't feel super viable. So for our main setup with General's Cry, we're using the Earthshatter of Prominence and Impale, Awakened Brutality, Pulverize, General's Cry, and Awakened Melee Fizz. As I mentioned, I think the Earthshatter of Prominence is really solid skill, and if you just built this as crit staffs on a Berserker or even a Champion or something, I think it could be really powerful, because the average damage between the initial hit and then the exploding spike is more than Earthquake's damage, but you can spam them out as quick as you want without having to wait for a delay between each one. So a really solid skill, I think, just didn't really get the most out of this setup. The motivation to try it with General's Cry in this sort of a setup was just that, it's got some kind of synergy. I'll put my Warcry on here for a sec. You do your General's Cry, it summons your guys, they all go and do their Earthshatter, which creates 5 spikes, and then the next time you General's Cry, it blows up all of those spikes and summons a new round of guys. So it kind of works nice like that, but just ended up being way too slow and clunky. Over here in the Marui, I have Cyclone, Castwell Channeling and Infused Channeling with Desecrate to generate corpses for us, and then I just use Shockwave and Fortify. Helps us out a little bit on clearing. It makes it so we can at least clear like white packs just as we Cyclone through them instantly instead of having to wait for our guys to blow up anything. But as you saw, I pretty much got to the point where I was just like skipping lots of packs on this character anyways because it's way too slow and clunky. Up here in the helmet, we've got Blood and Sand, Determination, and Pride that we're using for our Reservation. And then we've got a Molten Shell with Vol Molten Shell that I'm just popping reflexively here when I see something big coming. Then I've got a Flame Dash because I feel like you kind of need a movement skill on about every build in PoE now. Even if you have really fast movement speed, something like a Flame Dash, an instant thing to get through various boss attacks and stuff is really nice. Over here I've got a War Chief. I'm not even really sure if he's worth the slot in the unset ring because, without any kind of real totem investment, he basically just dies anytime something looks at him. And we don't have the totem mastery that makes the effects linger for 3 seconds or anything. So, I don't know. He's not really up very often. And then for a curse, we've just got a vulnerability on hit ring here on this unset ring so that we can get vulnerability off. Pantheon, I am using the Soul of Lunaris for some more phys damage reduction and movement speed, and most importantly probably that upgrade, the 6% reduced elemental damage taken if you've been hit recently. And then I really like Rislotha here, the upgrade especially, that 50% reduced life regen is really handy when you're doing Maven rotations and you don't want to carry something like a Frostbomb around. So that's basically what I did on the character. As you can see in the gameplay footage, it didn't really turn out being a very good build, but it was an interesting concept. And I think my next idea here is going to turn out a lot better. I'll probably try selling some stuff off from this character because I'm kind of bored of playing the slow, clunky style, so I don't really think I feel like keeping it geared for any reason. So I'll throw a couple of boss fights. I'll throw like one of the Maven invitations and an Uber Elder fight here on the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.